Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, July 16, 2024. Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat from New Jersey, is convicted in a federal bribery and corruption trial, found guilty by a jury of accepting gold bars and luxury cars in exchange for political favors. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the New Jersey Senator Cory and New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, all Democrats, have now called on Senator Menendez to resign. Senator Menendez saying, "I have never violated my public oath. I have never been anything but a patriot of my country and for my country. I have never, ever been a foreign agent." And he says he's going to appeal the conviction. Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, day number 2. We'll hear from Donald Trump Jr. about whether the assassination attempt on his father, the former president, and now 2024 Republican presidential nominee, will change the campaign rhetoric. Plus, longtime Ohio politician Keith Faber on Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, nominated as Republican vice president. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp talks about attending the convention even though he does not always agree with Donald Trump. And Congressman Jim Jordan gives an update on the investigation of the assassination attempt. President Joe Biden is in Las Vegas speaking to the NAACP National Convention, and the Democratic National Committee's Platform Committee approves a policy platform that will be formally adopted at the Democratic National Convention in August. From ABC News, Senator Bob Menendez was found guilty on all counts Tuesday in his federal corruption trial. Federal prosecutors in New York allege the New Jersey Democrat accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes in the form of cash, gold bars, mortgage payments, and more in exchange for the senator's political clout. 3 New Jersey businessmen who were also charged, along with the governments of Egypt and Qatar, were the alleged recipients. 2 of the co-defendants were convicted on all counts they faced. The jury deliberated for about 13 hours over 3 days. Menendez pleaded not guilty to 16 federal charges, including bribery, fraud, acting as a foreign agent, and obstruction. Reporting from ABC News, the prosecutors made statements outside the federal courthouse in Manhattan.
Good afternoon. My name is Damian Williams, and I'm the U.S. Attorney here in the Southern District of New York. Moments ago, a jury in this courthouse convicted Senator Robert Menendez of corruption and national security offenses. This case has always been about shocking levels of corruption. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes in the form of cash, gold bars, a Mercedes-Benz. This wasn't politics as usual, this was politics for profit. And now that a jury has convicted Bob Menendez, his years of selling his office to the highest bidder have finally come to an end. I want to thank the career prosecutors and law enforcement agents and analysts who meticulously investigated and prosecuted this case. Their work is the reason why this shocking corruption has finally been unearthed and brought to an end. They are the best of the best. I'm enormously proud of them and proud to serve with them. Thank you.
You seek the maximum sentence, sir?
Good afternoon. I'm Christy Curtis. I'm the Acting Assistant Director of the FBI's New York Field Office. Today is a day of victory and a victory for justice. Public corruption investigations like this hold our leaders accountable and ensure they serve the public's interest and not their own. This conviction comes after careful investigation and hard work by the FBI, IRS, and the U.S. Attorney's Office. The FBI's pursuit of truth and integrity was instrumental in securing this conviction. When an elected official betrays the trust placed in them, it undermines the foundation of our democracy. Thank you.
My name is Emmanuel Gomez, and I'm with IRS CI Criminal Investigations. I'm Assistant Special in Charge in the New York Field Office. Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you to U.S. Attorney Damian Williams for hosting us today. It is a great commitment and collaboration between IRS Criminal Investigations, the FBI, and SDNY that today's verdict was possible. I would like to recognize the work of the FBI Public Corruption C-Squad, the SDNY Public Corruption Unit, trial attorneys and paralegals for the tremendous effort in presenting this case, and the SDNY tax attorneys. I want to specifically recognize the IRS-CI special agents who worked this case in tandem with FBI special agents. Today's verdict is a reflection of all their hard work. Job well done.
Statements outside the federal courthouse in New York City. Washington Post writes Senator Menendez showed no emotion as the guilty verdicts were read around 1 p.m. after 3 days of jury deliberations. U.S. District Judge Sidney H. Stein scheduled sentencing for October 29th. The punishment could be decades in prison and a ban from holding office. As lawyers discussed bail and sentencing logistics, Menendez sat with his hands clasped together, covering his mouth. Menendez did not testify in his own defense. His team is expected to appeal, and legal experts say he could be helped by the Supreme Court's rulings in recent years narrowing the scope of federal bribery laws. That from the Washington Post. Senator Menendez and his lawyer, Adam Fee, spoke as well outside the courthouse.
Good afternoon. Obviously, I'm deeply disappointed by the jury's decision. I have every faith that the law and the facts did not sustain that decision and that we will be successful upon appeal. I have never violated my public oath. I have never been anything but a patriot of my country and for my country. I have never, ever been a foreign agent, and the decision rendered by the jury today would put at risk every member of the United States Senate in terms of what they think a foreign agent would be. I know my attorney want to say something, and then I'll be going.
Afternoon. We were surprised and disappointed with the jury's verdict. We disagree with it, and we believe today, as we have since day one, in Bob's innocence. There are grave appellate problems with this case and with this verdict, and we're going to pursue all appellate avenues aggressively, and we do expect he will be vindicated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat from New Jersey, and his attorney, Adam Fee, in New York City. The Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, putting out a one-line statement. In light of this guilty verdict, Senator Menendez must now do what is right for his constituents, the Senate, and our country, and resign. Senator Cory Booker, the other New Jersey senator, also Democrat, posting, I call on Senator Menendez to resign. I originally did so last fall because of the severity of the allegations against him and how they shook the public's trust. Now with this conviction, the urgency for Senator Menendez to step down and for the governor to appoint a replacement has even more urgency. And Governor Phil Murphy, Democrat of New Jersey, putting out a statement reiterating his call for Senator Menendez to resign and writing today's verdict, finding Senator Bob Menendez guilty on 16 counts, demonstrates that the senator broke the law, violated the trust of his constituents, and betrayed his oath of office. In America, everyone, no matter how powerful, is accountable to our laws. That was a statement from Governor Murphy. Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, the minority whip, who is running to be the next Senate Republican leader in the next Congress, reacted to the guilty verdict at an event hosted by Politico in Milwaukee, where the Republican National Convention is being held this week. He's interviewed by reporter Meredith Lee Hill.
But first, I wanted to get to some news of the day and get your reaction to Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey being found guilty on all counts in his federal corruption trial. And now that he's been found guilty, do you think he should resign?
I do. I think it's time, and I think that's what a lot of his colleagues, including a number of the members of the Democrat leadership in the Senate, that's the conclusion they've come to as well.
If he doesn't resign, would you encourage Democrats to vote to expel him?
I think that's a decision ultimately they're going to have to make. They're in the majority, but I would certainly think that would be appropriate based on the circumstances in the case. I mean, obviously, he's going to appeal it. He's indicated that he will, but I think it's, I think the die is cast on that one, and it's time to move on.
Understood.
Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, the minority whip in Milwaukee, at a program hosted by Politico. At the Senate's website, under the heading About Expulsion, it reads, Article 1, Section 5 of the U.S. Constitution provides that each House of Congress may determine the rules of its proceedings, punish its members for disorderly behavior, and with the concurrence of 2/3, expel a member. Since 1789, the Senate has expelled only 15 members. Of that number, 14 were expelled during the Civil War for supporting the Confederacy. In several other cases, the Senate considered expulsion, but either dropped those proceedings or failed to act before the member left office. In those cases, corruption was the primary cause of complaint. This is Washington Today. From CBS News, Republicans from across the country are returning Tuesday to Milwaukee's Fiserv Forum for day 2 of the Republican National Convention after a busy kickoff day that featured a formal nomination of former President Donald Trump, the highly anticipated announcement of his running mate, and the former president's first public appearance since an attack on his life over the weekend. Each day of the convention features a theme that plays off of Trump's Make America Great Again tagline. While Monday's theme was Make America Wealthy Once Again, Tuesday's theme is Make America Safe Once Again. The theme is a nod to what the Trump campaign calls the Biden administration's soft-on-crime policies that it says have created dystopian nightmares out of the American cities and communities, which Trump plans to correct. That was the story from CBS News. Donald Trump Jr., son of the former president and now 2024 Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump, was interviewed today by Axios co-founder Mike Allen in Milwaukee. One of the issues, the tone of the presidential race following the assassination attempt on Donald Trump last weekend.
Your friend Tucker Carlson told me he thinks that former President Trump's unifying tone in his interviews since then is sincere. Tucker said, getting shot in the face changes a man. Is your father a changed man?
I think actually, yes. I mean, I was there, so I spent probably about 3 or 4 hours with him on Friday, the day before, going through his speech, what he was going to deliver at the convention, and it was hot. And by the way, I think it probably should have been at that time, but again, a lot changes once you've gotten shot in the face.
So this was the humdinger version?
I think it was the humdinger. By the way, I went through the same thing myself, right? It was like, I'm not exactly known for being a wallflower, and I say what I'm thinking, and that can be perhaps controversial at times, and doesn't really matter. I'll say it. But no, it's very different, and honestly, as it should be.
Different how?
I just toned down from that. I think we're trying to certainly de-escalate some of that rhetoric. Now, I don't know if you saw it. I dealt with this sort of yesterday on the floor. I went out there with my brother, and we were delegates for Florida. He was the head delegate, so we literally got the privilege of throwing my father over the delegate count, right? So it's a big moment. I did it for us in 2016, as a delegate in New York, and so he was doing it this time, and we're standing there, and we're about to do this sort of momentous occasion, sort of solidifying the nomination, and there was a reporter from MS, I call it MSDNC, but MSNBC, but it's one and the same. And, it just starts off with me. We're literally seconds away from doing this momentous thing. So if your father's in, is he bringing back all the hate? And I was like, what? Like, really? Like, right now? Right? Like, and it was so, you could see the hatred in his eyes. Just a propagandist, not a journalist. And so I was like, what are you talking about? You mean the hate like that you guys created by running with, Russia collusion like it was real? They spread that. They called half the country Nazis and fascists. And was that us? Like, well, if the response was aggressive, I think it has to be, because when someone calls you a traitor, and as someone who sat for 50 hours of congressional testimony.
Let's just pause and say it's perfectly legitimate to ask the question. So I will ask you, how long will the new Trump last?
Listen, I think it lasts. I think it lasts. I think those are, there are events that change you for a couple minutes, and there's events that change you permanently. Now, again, it's Trump, so you're still going to be reactionary. But to my point of this guy goes into this tirade of...
We are, he is who he is.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. But again, the reason he's been able to be successful is he doesn't just accept their narrative.
Donald Trump Jr. interviewed by Axios co-founder Mike Allen in Milwaukee today. Story from ABC News. The Department of Homeland Security and the FBI have issued a bulletin to law enforcement across the country warning them that, in the wake of Saturday's attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump, violent extremists could try to conduct follow-on or retaliatory attacks at events over the next few months related to the 2024 presidential election. The bulletin urged local, state, and federal law enforcement and their partners to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity. The bulletin said the FBI and DHS remain concerned, particularly given that individuals in some online communities have threatened, encouraged, or referenced acts of violence in response to the attempted assassination. That was from ABC News. Tonight's Republican convention program begins 6 p.m. Eastern. We'll have live gavel-to-gavel coverage on C-SPAN radio and television, streamed at cspan.org or follow on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. Among the speakers, Republican Senate candidates from Arizona, Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Nevada, Montana, and Virginia. House Speaker Mike Johnson will be there. Former presidential candidates Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, and Ron DeSantis, and RNC co-chair Laura Trump, the daughter-in-law of the nominee. Also reality TV star Savannah Chrisley. Chris LaSavita, senior advisor to the Trump presidential campaign, spoke about tonight's theme, crime and safety, and Donald Trump's acceptance speech scheduled for Thursday night. He was interviewed by Katie Pointer-Bainey, managing director of government affairs for Delta Defense and the U.S. Concealed Carry Association for Saving Lives Action Fund.
Well, President Trump formally accepts the nomination on Thursday. I know you don't want to give any spoilers away, but what should we expect to hear from the president when it comes to issues of crime and personal safety protection? Now that's really at the top of mind for voters.
Right. Well, again, it's and I won't give away too much. One thing I've learned is you don't get in front of the boss. But you know, I think it's, you know, you guys see how the campaign is playing out, the issue sets that we're talking about. I mean, obviously tonight there's a little bit of a focus on, you know, how the Republican Party is unified and how, you know, they're lining up behind the president. And, you know, Nikki Haley speaking tonight, Governor DeSantis is speaking tonight. Meanwhile, on the Democrat side, these guys are literally, you're watching an attempted coup take place in front of your eyes. They're trying to remove the sitting president as a candidate. I mean, what they accuse Republicans of doing, they do freely on national TV every day. And everybody says, oh, you know, it reminds me of that clip from Animal House way back in the day where you know, for those of you that remember the movie, that JROTC guy standing there in the middle of the parade that's going to hell. And he's like, you know, all's well, all's well. It's like, this is Joe Biden, all's well. And they're literally trying to remove the guy. And it's just remarkable. And so, and then, you know, they want to talk about how Republicans aren't a unified party. I mean, I don't know a bigger contrast than that. But in terms of the speech, again, I think a lot of the same thematics that people have seen develop over the past couple of days. If you look at what we're doing in the convention, you look at the convention programming that we had last night, you saw a lot of normal people. Just not that our elected office holders are not normal. No, you haven't done those either. But you know, there were several just normal folks who have from different parts of the country that all have unique issues that they're dealing with in the current state of affairs as it relates to Joe Biden and the current administration. And we wanted to be able to highlight that through the eyes of a normal voter. Mm-hmm. And so, and you're going to see that thematic. Last night was economic, and then we'll have that from the standpoint of crime and punishment, immigration, and inflation, all of those things, national defense. So I think that should give you a pretty good idea of what the speech looks like. I mean, obviously the president has, the last time we had a convention in 2016 and accepted the party's nomination, it was a conversation about what he wanted to accomplish. Now we're going to have a conversation about what I did and how I'm going to do it again. Mm-hmm. And that's just fundamentally different, from a lot of different points.
Chris LaSavita, senior advisor to the Donald Trump presidential campaign, at a program today in Milwaukee, site of the Republican National Convention, hosted by USCCA, that's the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. Story from MarketWatch. J.D. Vance has become a big name again in the publishing and film worlds. After former President Donald Trump named Ohio's junior senator as his running mate on the 2024 Republican ticket, Vance climbed to the top of Amazon's bestsellers list for the paperback edition of Hillbilly Elegy, his 2016 book that describes his hardscrabble upbringing in Ohio. That was the story from MarketWatch. J.D. Vance talked about that book on C-SPAN's Q&A program in 2016. C-SPAN will be re-airing that program this Sunday, July 21st at 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN radio and television. The Ohio delegation to the Republican National Convention held a breakfast this morning in Milwaukee, and Keith Faber, the current Ohio State Auditor and former Ohio Senate President, spoke about the selection of Senator Vance as the vice presidential running mate to Donald Trump.
J.D. Vance is exactly what Ohio is.
And you stop and think about it. Look, I have some similarities in my background with J.D. Vance. I was raised by a single mom. You know, we didn't have a lot of stuff. But coming up, I will tell you J.D. Vance's Ohio story. It's a story about being a heavy manufacturing state that had some issues. Okay, it's a state that had its challenges. But it's also a state that shows the difference if you work on principles and values, the values that, frankly, your entire statewide ticket, your congressional delegation, your House and your Senate, and now your Supreme Court, okay, we got very important races coming up in the Supreme Court, articulate about a different vision. And that vision is very simple. You empower people, you shrink government. If you do things that empower people to make decisions, that give them the ability to pursue their God-given potential through education and opportunity, the state can triumph and succeed. And that's J.D. Vance's story. His sacrifice and service as a United States Marine is certainly worthy of note. But that got him to Ohio State, where he excelled at the Ohio State University, someplace that was nice enough to give me a degree. The fact of the matter is, it's his leadership and his academic pursuit and his challenges that have made him who he is. And you see it in what he has done as a United States Senator. He didn't go to D.C. to go to cocktail parties. He didn't go to D.C. to hang out with the cool kids. He went to D.C. to fight for Ohio. Now, we got a race with Bernie Moreno and Sherrod Brown. But if you compare and contrast what Sherrod Brown has done in, 40, 50 years, with what J.D. Vance has worked on and tried to accomplish in his first 2 years, you see the difference between somebody who is there to work and improve Ohio and somebody is there for the progressive status quo.
Keith Faber, Ohio's state auditor and former Ohio Senate president, at a breakfast held by the Ohio delegation to the Republican National Convention this morning in Milwaukee. Story from the Milwaukee Journal-Constitution. The Democratic National Committee wasted no time responding to Trump selecting Vance as his running mate. 16 billboards and a mobile billboard in the Milwaukee area sprouted overnight in time for the RNC's second day. It's the first paid media campaign that takes shots at the Trump-Vance ticket. The billboards strike a grim tone, veering on doomsday for democracy. The DNC took aim at the Trump-Vance stance on abortion, tax breaks for the wealthy, and the Affordable Care Act. Senator Tim Scott, Republican of South Carolina, former presidential candidate himself, was one of the primetime speakers at the Republican National Convention Monday night. Today he took part in a tribute to African-American delegates to the Republican Convention. It was hosted by the Black Republican Mayors Association and Georgia Republican Party.
Here's the truth. I remember the story in the Bible where there's one dude who thought he was the only one left in the whole world that was going to praise the Lord. God said, look around. You're not the only one. As African-American conservatives, sometimes it's easy to feel like you're the only one. Anyone ever felt that way? You are not the only one. There are thousands, if not millions, all around the country who believe like we believe, pray like we believe, do what we know that needs to be done. If we keep doing, the people will follow. I'll close with this. Mayor, Bruce, whole team. One of the things that happened to me in an interview today, a young lady said, is it hard being a black Republican? I've been black all my life, been conservative all my life. Then she asked the question, second question was this, are there people in leadership in the community who want to keep black conservatism in a corner? I said, absolutely. But when you have Byron on the team, it's hard to keep you in a corner. When you got Burgess Owens on the team, it's hard to keep it in the corner. When you have John James on the team and Daniel Cameron on the team, when you start looking around the country, you realize that the team is growing. Our movement cannot be stopped. The needs of the people will be met, and the actual solution to what we need, whether you're black or white or Hispanic or Asian or Native American, comes from a conservative foundation upon which good things happen. God bless you.
Senator Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, joining other African-American delegates to the Republican National Convention at a special tribute today in Milwaukee, hosted by the Black Republican Mayors Association and Georgia Republican Party. Not all the Republican delegates to the convention say they have been 100% all the time on board with nominee Donald Trump. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp has had some public disagreements, particularly over the 2020 presidential election results in his state, which Joe Biden won. Governor Kemp was interviewed today by Eugene Daniels, Politico's White House correspondent.
What concerns do you still have, or do you have concerns about him as a candidate, President Trump, or as an actual president, as a candidate or president?
Well, listen.
And how he operates.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know how he's going to operate. He's the nominee. That's, the people have spoken for him on the Republican side of the aisle. I've said all along I was going to support the ticket. I haven't certainly agreed with everything that President Trump did. And I don't know if y'all heard this, but he also didn't agree with some of the things that I've done over the years. But that's okay in politics. I think, my focus right now is on the future. And I've, been pretty pointed at saying over the last year, really speaking to him and all the other people that were running for the Republican nomination, is like, we got to quit looking in the rearview mirror. We got to be forward thinking. We got to tell people what we're for. And, we got to win. Yeah. You can't govern if you don't win. You could look at what's happening right now. All of this, in my eyes, in some ways, is our own fault because we let Joe Biden win that race. We shouldn't have done that. And we have opportunity to, in my opinion, right that wrong. And we've been through that process to figure out who our nominee would be. Now we got our vice presidential nominee. And I think you'll see Republicans rallying to really the policies that Donald Trump pushed when he was in office, having a hell of a lot better border security than we have right now, making sure that we have a strong economy and putting America first from an economic perspective. For every regulation they pass, they got to get rid of 2 or 3 or 4 streamlining processes and just a lot of other things that they did to make the country strong, rebuilding the military and many other things. And so, that's why I'm supporting the ticket. And that's why, we're going to work really hard to hold Georgia in 2024.
Governor Brian Kemp, Republican of Georgia, at a Politico discussion in Milwaukee. Story from Axios. Almost every major 2024 Republican Senate candidate vying to flip a Democratic seat will give a speech on the Republican convention stage Tuesday evening, with one notable exception, former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. Hogan's team confirmed he will not be in Milwaukee this week and was not invited to give a convention speech. Hogan has explicitly distanced himself from Trump as he runs for Senate in the deep blue state of Maryland, which has not elected a Republican to the Senate since 1980. That was from Axios. And from CNN, National Security Council spokesperson Adrienne Watson said on Tuesday there's no known link between Donald Trump's would-be assassin Thomas Matthew Crooks and anyone else at the moment. She said the investigation of Saturday's attempted assassination of former President Trump is active and ongoing. At this time, law enforcement has reported that their investigation has not identified ties between the shooter and any accomplice or co-conspirator, foreign or domestic. The CNN article says investigators are still searching for a motive behind the attempted assassination. Their probe has included gaining access to Crooks' cell phone and interviewing his family and friends. Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, chair of the Judiciary Committee, spoke today about the U.S. House's planned hearings on this subject. He was in an interview with Politico reporter Rachel Bade.
Let's turn to Saturday's tragedy. You're very close with the former president, so I can imagine that the news was very shocking and definitely shook you. But I want to ask more about the security failures. We had a shooter who was, 150 yards away from the former president. You had people seeing this person bear crawl up the roof, alerting authorities. I mean, how the hell does this happen?
Yeah, I think that's the fundamental question. I would even make it even more fundamental, I guess, is there's a finite number of buildings that a bad guy could get on the roof of and do harm. So what is that number? 2. Well, Probably not even two, because one of them we had the good guy on. Okay. So the good guy. So maybe it's just one. Maybe it's just that one. There may be, if you look at the videos and the pictures, there's some other buildings there. So maybe, but it's a relatively small number. The fact that they weren't secure and we didn't have them secure, and I'm no expert in all this security, but people who I've talked to and who've commented on it, that seems to be the fundamental question. So why wasn't that done? And then you go from there, okay, when there was the alert, what happened then? What was the TikTok and the sequence of things? There's a report today, I think, in the Post that says there was 86 seconds between when someone first said something and when the first shot was fired. I want to know, I'd love to talk to the local police officer who supposedly went up and confronted the bad guy and then backed down, according to reports. I'd love to talk to that individual. And I'd really like to talk to, in addition to talking to Director Wray and Director Cheadle and the people who are coming, I'd really like to talk to the guy on the roof who took out the bad guy, the counter sniper, the sniper for the Secret Service who took out the bad guy.
Like, could he see him, right?
And for how long?
Yeah.
And what did he see? And did he try? What was the radio communication? I think all those are questions that need to be addressed. And the kind of questions I think Director Wray is going to get next Wednesday or Thursday, whatever the 24th is next week when he's in front of our committee.
Are there plans at this point to either subpoena or just invite those individuals you just mentioned to come in to testify?
Well, Mr. Chairman Comer's invited Director Cheadle. We've already had Director Wray scheduled. He's coming.
I mean those people on the ground.
Oh, yeah. We'll want to talk to them. Now, they're going to be, I think, the way these things typically work is, I assume the FBI is going to say, we're going to talk to him first. It's sensitive, ongoing investigation. We need to
But the public wants answers here.
Very true. And so this is, and I tried to express this yesterday on the phone. We got a briefing from the Deputy Director, Ranking Member Nat'l, and myself, and some of our staff yesterday on a little conference call. I tried to express that, and I think they understand the gravity of this and the importance of this investigation.
Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, chair of the Judiciary Committee, interviewed by Politico reporter Rachel Bade at a Politico event in Milwaukee on the sidelines of the Republican National Convention. Also today, Congressman Mark Green, Republican from Wisconsin and chair of the Homeland Security Committee, sent a letter inviting the Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, the FBI Director Christopher Wray, and the Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle to testify before his committee on July 23rd on the attempted assassination of former President Trump. Story from AP, a threat from Iran prompted the U.S. Secret Service to boost protection around Donald Trump before Saturday's attempted assassination of the former president, though it appears unrelated to the rally attack, according to two U.S. officials. Upon learning of the threat, the Biden administration reached out to senior officials at the Secret Service to make them aware, the officials said, adding it was shared with the lead agent on Trump's protection detail and the Trump campaign that prompted the agency to surge resources and assets. That from AP. Washington Today continues in a moment.
All this week, hear speeches from the Republican Convention on the Campaign Trail podcast feed. You can listen to the speeches shortly after they happen each evening. Find and follow the Campaign Trail podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. One day after its march in downtown Milwaukee, writes AP, a coalition of protest groups says its activity in the city is coming to a close. In a statement Tuesday, the coalition to march on the RNC said it has no further plans to organize demonstrations around the Republican National Convention. Coalition said our endorsing organizations will continue their work to stand with Palestine, defend and expand immigrants' rights, defend women's LGBTQ and reproductive rights, and demand peace, justice, and equity for all. The coalition says that in the coming weeks, many of its groups will be looking ahead to demonstrating in August outside the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. That was from Associated Press. Milwaukee's Mayor Cavalier Johnson, a Democrat, held a news conference this morning about the protests.
We are officially through the first day of the Republican National Convention, and by my most important measures, things are going pretty well. And I say that because we've been able to maintain safety thanks to all of the partners who've stepped up to make sure that this is a safe convention. And Milwaukee is receiving very positive attention, not just across the United States, but literally around the world. And that's really exciting to me. I've talked to a number of people who have been here, who've walked around the city, gone out into some neighborhoods. Folks were particularly happy about walking along Lake Michigan, going to some of the parks, going up to Bradford Beach, and experiencing Milwaukee that way. I would imagine that County Executive Crowley is pretty proud about that. There were a couple of arrests. One occurred in the afternoon. An individual who was climbing a fence into a restricted area. By the way, this was his second arrest related to the RNC in 2 days for incidents around the convention. A second arrest was in the evening. An individual was blocking traffic and did not move when officers repeatedly asked her to do so. Traffic in the immediate downtown area, it has been slowed, particularly if you're trying to drive into the vehicle restricted area. As people become more accustomed to the restrictions, I suspect that traffic snarls are going to ease. The demonstrations that occurred yesterday, they proceeded without any major problems. The largest gathering on Monday went off very peacefully, and I'm happy to report that. That's the one that began over at Red Arrow Park immediately to our north here. There was one arrest at the end of the gathering for disorderly conduct. Most importantly, no one was hurt, and there was no significant property damage that was reported as a result of these demonstrations. At the designated demonstration areas and parade route, overall it was a calm day. It was a calm day, it was a peaceful day. There were many registered groups and individuals that actually didn't even show up. It appears only one group actually completed the designated parade route that the city put together. That may have been because they instead chose to go to Red Arrow Park and join the larger group. We don't know that information.
Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson, a Democrat, at a news conference this morning. C-SPAN's primary mission is to cover the Republican National Convention and then the Democratic National Convention in August, gavel to gavel, let you hear and see everything that happens. We've also been checking out who else is covering the convention, and we spoke to the organizer of Media Row.
I'm Jack Kelly from Wisconsin Watch, and we are on Wisconsin Media Row inside here at the Republican National Convention. Wisconsin Media Row was actually an idea born out of the 2020 Democratic Convention, which of course did not take place here in Milwaukee quite the way many folks expected it to. My boss, Matt DeFore, who works with me at Wisconsin Watch, was formerly working with the Wisconsin State Journal and got really interested in this idea of bringing a state-specific media area to a big national convention like this. And so there was some initial interest from the DNC. Of course, the pandemic hit, everything changed, and the world was turned upside down. And so when Republicans announced that they were going to do the convention here in Milwaukee, those conversations picked up. Kind of happened behind the scenes for several months. They were interested. They've been great partners in setting this up for us. And we were able to make it official back in the spring. And of course, here we are now with some 25 news organizations and from all over the state of Wisconsin. So it's been a really great partnership. We wanted this to be for whoever wanted to participate. It was very affordable for news organizations to get a spot in here, and it was open to pretty much any Wisconsin media organization that wanted to be involved. So we did a lot of outreach and coordination in the months leading up to the convention. It was a lot of email chains, and eventually we settled on the 25 news organizations that are here right now. So far as we can tell, we're pretty sure this is the first time that there has been a national political convention from either party that has had a dedicated media area for the state that is hosting the convention. So it's kind of cool, a little piece of history here at the Republican National Convention. I think it's really important, right? Local news organizations and local reporters have built relationships with their communities and can be that trusted voice that sometimes the national, unfamiliar figure can't always lend. And so it's really interesting to see what people would do this week and how they can kind of connect what's happening here in Milwaukee, which is garnering this international attention, and connect it back to communities all across the state, whether it's in Green Bay, in Madison, smaller communities that are kind of spread across the media markets here. So I think it'll be really exciting to see what people do over the next few days. We're doing some exciting stuff at Wisconsin Watch. We have a partnership with a group called GigaFact, where we'll be doing quite a bit of fact checking, both during the Republican National Convention and again next month with the Democratic National Convention. all sorts of newsletter offerings, as many news organizations do, and we'll also be do some videos and some fun video recaps and trying to keep people informed and engaged in a different way. That's kind of a new project for us at Wisconsin Watch. I don't know if I can speak for the whole state, but we, definitely have been appreciative of their willingness to work with us to make this happen. And so far things are going smoothly. So we've been very appreciative of the host committee and the RNC for making this space happen.
Jack Kelly, Wisconsin Watch State House reporter, speaking to C-SPAN at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Story from Reuters. President Joe Biden returns to the campaign trail on Tuesday in the battleground state of Nevada, where he will address the NAACP National Convention, a major gathering of black voters, in his first political speech after the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the oldest and largest U.S. civil rights organization, represents a key constituency for the Democratic Party. While blacks turned out heavily for Biden in 2020, polls have shown waning support for him among black voters in this election. That was from Reuters. Here's a portion of President Biden's speech.
This project, 2024, 2025, Trump's deal, he talks about education. HBCUs are as good as any other university. Guess what the problem is? Oh, I'm serious. Not a joke. And Kamala and I have a constant fight. She says Howard's the best. I said Delaware State's the best. But that's where I got my start. But my point is this. They don't have the endowment. So what are the jobs of the future? The high-tech jobs of the future. You're going to pay a lot of money. They don't have the money for the laboratories. They don't have the money for all that material. So that's why I've invested a record $16 billion in HBCU. Because no HBCU student is any less qualified than any student anywhere else. And by the way, we're making sure that no one goes to jail for the mere use or possession of marijuana. The record should be expunged. It holds them back. All told, because of you, NAACP, we're making the most significant investments in black America ever in all of history. We're seeing the results. The racial wealth gap is the lowest it's been in 20 years. Inflation is down in 3 years and coming down further, and we're going to have, as they say, a soft landing. Folks, you're going to see us grow faster and faster. That's not just my view. It's the view of 16 Nobel Prize-winning economists who put out a statement looking at my economic plan and Trump's. They said, my plan will continue to lower inflation, continue to grow the economy. Prices are falling for cars, appliances, and groceries. We're going to keep corporate greed at bay. But here's the thing, what I said about Trump. They said, his policies will cause a recession. No, this is not a Democratic outfit. 16 Nobel laureates. Look, I come from the corporate state of the world, Delaware. I know how they work. There's more corporations incorporated in my state than any state in America, all combined. But that's what? We have to deal with corporate greed now. No, it is. Corporate profits are double since the pandemic. And they keep bringing prices down. We have to bring prices down further. Look, folks, the idea that corporate-owned housing is able to raise your rent $300-400 a month or something, under what I'm about to announce, they can't raise it more than $55. That debate is taking place. The bottom line is we're just getting started.
President Joe Biden at the NAACP National Convention in Las Vegas. Article from the Wall Street Journal. House Democrats are considering whether to sign a letter opposing efforts to name President Biden as the party's official presidential nominee before the August convention, as questions about his viability in November continue to swirl. An unsigned letter circulating among congressional Democrats states that holding a virtual roll call as early as later this week, rather than a traditional state-by-state roll call on the convention floor in Chicago, could damage party unity and interrupt the current discussion on whether Biden should remain the party's pick, according to a copy viewed by the Wall Street Journal. And the virtual nomination is necessary, the party says, to ensure that Joe Biden is on the ballot in Ohio for the November election. Ohio's deadline to have a nominee for ballot access is August 7th, but the Democratic National Convention doesn't begin until August 19th. The Democratic National Committee Platform Committee met virtually today to recommend a Democratic Party platform that will be officially adopted by the delegates at the convention. Regina Romero, mayor of Tucson, Arizona, is the Platform Committee's co-chair.
The choice could not be more clear on where we stand. And you will see that throughout this platform committee, we will demonstrate what we mean. The platform highlights the success of the past 4 years of President Biden, that we've created nearly 16 million jobs. Prescription drug prices are coming down, and we're taking the most ambitious action in world history to fight climate change. We're seizing record amounts of fentanyl and securing our border in the face of Republican inaction, and strengthening NATO and restoring American leadership around the world. We've worked to close the persistent racial wealth gap that has plagued our country for generations, with Black wealth climbing 60% since before the pandemic, and Latino household wealth increasing by 19% in the last 3 years. It's safe to say that the last 4 years have shown us unprecedented progress, and now we must finish the job. This platform gives us a clear vision of what we as Democrats want to accomplish in the next 4 years. We will continue to grow the economy from the bottom up and the middle out, investing in American infrastructure, pushing Congress to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, extending overtime pay to millions more workers, and closing the racial wealth gap. We will reward work, not wealth, cutting taxes for the middle class and low-income Americans, making the super wealthy pay their fair share, including through a 25% minimum tax on billionaires, and raising taxes on corporations. Our plan will cut the deficit by $3 trillion. We'll secure our border, fight human trafficking, reform the asylum system, keep families together, and provide a pathway to citizenship for dreamers. And we'll keep communities safe, passing universal background checks, banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazine, ending the gun lobby's immunity from liability, and push Congress to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. The breadth and depth of this platform is a display of the diversity of our party and the vision we have for our country to make sure every American has a fair shot. I am honored to stand with the president and to stand behind this platform that deepens our commitment to the promise of America and lays out what we must do to finish the job that President Biden and Vice President Harris started.
Regina Romero, mayor of Tucson, Arizona, and the DNC Platform Committee co-chair at today's virtual meeting, during which the committee approved the platform. It will be officially ratified at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in August. And the DNC has posted it, if you'd like to read it. It's at democrats.org/where-we-stand/party-platform. Wall Street today, the Dow up 742, Nasdaq up 36, S&P up 35. From Reuters, Israeli forces battled Hamas-led fighters in several parts of the Gaza Strip on Tuesday, and Palestinian health officials said at least 57 people were killed in Israeli bombardments of southern and central areas. The Palestinian Islamist militant group Hamas has accused Israel of stepping up attacks in Gaza to try to derail efforts by Arab mediators and the United States to reach a ceasefire deal. Israel says it's trying to root out Hamas fighters. That was from Reuters. This came up today at the U.S. State Department briefing with spokesperson Matthew Miller.
You said yesterday that you had seen civilian casualties come down from high points of the conflict and from where they were 6 weeks ago, but that you wanted to see them end completely. Palestinian health officials said at least 57 people were killed in Israeli bombardments. Does this increase your concerns at all, and have you raised this with your Israeli counterparts?
It doesn't increase our concerns because we have had extraordinary concerns about civilian casualties for some time. And that's why we are pushing so hard, not just pushing, but actively negotiating to get a ceasefire that would stop this daily tragedy where you see innocent Palestinian civilians being killed as a result of this war. But even before we get to what we hope will be a ceasefire, continue to push Israel to take further measures to minimize civilian harm. The Secretary pushed Ron Dermer and National Security Advisor Hanegbi when they were here yesterday. We understand. Look, in all of these strikes, Israel has said publicly that they were striking militants, and of course we've seen reported deaths of militants, including Hamas leaders in some of these strikes, but we've also seen credible reports of civilian deaths. And so it is why we continue to push so hard for a ceasefire, which is the way to really get a lasting solution to the ongoing violence in Gaza.
State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller at his news conference in Washington. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Have a good night.